Matthew chapter 14, verses 15 through 18. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy them victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They need not depart. Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he said, verse 18, and he said, Bring them hither to me. And if I could use for a subject message today, if you will allow me to, I would like to use I am enough. I am enough. And it's customary every new year to have a new saying, a new theme, a new motto for that year. We create those things and we create little cliche sayings that help us, that motivate us for the beginning of the year. But by the end of January, we have erased it out of our phones. It is off our confession wall. It is not only out of sight and out of mind, but we are so discouraged that we have lost faith and we won't even let it come out of our mouth. Has anybody ever created or you come up with a New Year's resolution, and when you don't see the progress that you were looking to have, you get discouraged and you just put it aside and you just mark it off as if it was something that just happened that didn't get done? And typically it does not last long at all. Most people will ask me or have asked me, what is your New Year's resolution? And this year, my response was, I don't have a new one. I don't have a new one. And oftentimes what happens is by the end of January, we're so burnt out with it, we're so over with it that we've just moved on to something else. And instead of building up our faith to believe God for what he has already promised, we get a new hope, we get a new slogan, thinking that it is result producing faith. And sometimes what will happen is we will get a new hope, but we don't get new faith. We will come up with a new idea. We will come up with a new boyfriend. We will come up with a new girlfriend. We will come up with a new job, thinking that that's new faith. And in all actuality, all we are doing is creating a cycle that is on repeat. We create it, and if it doesn't work, we forget it and get a new one. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? We create it, and if it doesn't work, we get a new one. I come up with a new idea. I come up with a new plan. I come up with a new idea, all because the first one didn't work. And so I find myself in a cycle to where I'm constantly repeating this over and over and over again. But there are times that God does not want us to get a new slogan. He doesn't want us to get a new dream. He does not want for us to get a new idea, because God is wanting to fulfill the last thing that he promised you that he was going to do, because he is enough. Come on. There's some things, is there anybody other than me that can relate to the fact that there are some things that I know that God has promised me, and because I did not see the fruit of it right when I was expecting to see the fruit of it, I put it to the side. And I said, I'll come back to it, or either I put it to the side and just forget about it. And then when the new year comes in, I come up with a new one. Last year, my goal was to lose 15 pounds. Well, I didn't quite reach that one. So this year I come up with a new goal to go to 20. I didn't have enough faith to believe God for the 15, but now I'm going to up the ante and I'm going to go to 20. Has anybody else ever done that besides me? And then we're sitting there and we're frustrated and we're thinking that God has not done what he has promised he was going to do. But in all actuality, there was something else that was needed. And we pick up our text with a crowd that's over 5,000 people. It is including men, women, and children at a healing service that Jesus is having. The evening has set in, and the disciples, they suggest to Jesus that they should let the people go. They basically said, we've been here for some time now, and we probably should let the people go so they can go buy food for themselves. And we find that in verse 15, where we began our reading at. And the disciples, they tell Jesus, they said, we probably should let the people go so they could go buy food for themselves. But prior to making this suggestion, the disciples had assessed some factors that we're going to look at. And I'm going to read verse 15 again in your hearing. And it says, and when it was evening, the disciples came in saying, this is a desert place. So the first thing that the disciples had noticed and they had assessed was the fact that it was a dry place. It was a place that was not conducive to produce life necessities. More times than often we measure God's ability to perform what he has said to the hostility of the environment that we are in. I'm going to say that again. More times than often, we measure God's ability to perform what he has said to the hostility of the environment that we are in. The more hostile we see the environment, the less likely we are to believe God to perform what he said. The less resistance it is, the more we are likely to believe God. So therefore, the environment, in fact, impacts and affects the way that we believe God. But some hostile and resistant environments are not your promise's birthing place. I need for Life Meets the Word to catch that. Some hostile and resistant environments are not your promise's birthing place. It's your faith's birthing place. I'm gonna make that clear for you in a minute. Again, some hostile and resistant environments are not your promise's birthing place. It's your faith's birthing place. Because if your faith can be birthed in that hostile and resistant environment, if your faith can be birthed there, then your promise can live there. Did somebody just catch that? If your faith can be birthed there, then your promise can live there, because your faith is what makes the impossible possible. So if your faith can be birthed in that place, then your promise can live in that place, no matter how hostile it is, no matter how volatile it is. Because if your faith has the power to make the impossible possible, then your faith also has enough power to sustain your promise. Come on. So sometimes it's not the devil. Sometimes it's not your punishment. It's your necessary birthing place for your faith. Because again, if your faith can be birthed there, then your promise can live there. Because inside of your faith is impossible power. Is impossible power. So they looked at the environment. And then the next thing the scripture says, it says, and the time is now past. So they noticed the time. They said it's getting late. Time often impacts many of us. How many times have we looked at a promise and compared it to the time and concluded that it's too late? Oh, it's too late for me to do that. It's too late in life for me to go back to school. It's too late for me to start the business. I'm going to tell y'all something. We got a man up here that is so full of faith. And if you would ever sit down and be able to have the opportunity to have a conversation with him, in his age, You would think that he would be sitting down somewhere, but he's always coming up with some type of business plan. And I think the one that he currently has going on is he's getting ready to open him a storefront, because he said, it's not about my age. He said, it's all about my faith. He said, it's not about my age. He said, it's about my faith. And so sometimes when he gets resistance, he gets trouble, because he said, don't knock my faith. He said, don't worry about my age. You just don't knock my faith. Come on. Can you understand me, Mr. Ron? He's saying, he said, don't knock my age. He said, because I got the faith to do it. And so the disciples, they look at the time. And they begin to say it's too late, like many of us have done in life. When God has promised us something, we've looked at the time and we've said, no, ain't no way I can do that now, because I should be actually baking cookies and waiting for my grandchildren to come over. So I can't do this. I probably should have did that a lot earlier in life. But God is saying, it's not about your age. It's not about the time. It's about your faith. And if we're not careful, we will allow time to run out our faith. If we are not careful, we will allow time to run out our faith. And the next thing that the disciples had assessed, they began to assess the crowd. And they looked at the number of people. And they said, send the multitude away. And they looked at the number of people in comparison to their ability. Have you ever had a promise from God and you got weary and you got discouraged at it coming to pass, because instead of you focusing on what God had promised you, you begin to look at what God has promised you through the lens of your ability, and you said, it's too much for me. I can't do this. It's too much for me. I can't do this. And the disciples, they began to look at it and they said, it's too many people for us to feed. Ain't no way in the world we can feed all of these people. Do you know how many promises lay gravesite because numbers outweigh ability? Do you know how many promises lay gravesite because the numbers outweigh the ability? But the moment we start comparing, or the moment that we start looking at the numbers in comparison to our make it, watch this, to our make the impossible possible faith. I'm going to say that again and slow it down. The moment we start looking at the numbers in comparison to our make the impossible possible faith, we're going to have a promise-demic. That's the word that God gave me in my closet this week. He said, we will have a promise-demic. And most of us know what I'm trying to say, because we have been living in a pandemic where there was outbreaks of all cases in every county, in every state. There is not an area that has not been impacted. Come on here, follow what I'm saying. There's not an area that has not been impacted by COVID, by a pandemic. We've had every area of our lives touched. Our jobs have been touched. Our money has been touched. The grocery stores, the retailers. There's no getting away from it, because we've been experiencing a pandemic. But notice what God is saying. He said, but the moment we start looking at the numbers in comparison to our make the impossible possible faith, because that's what our faith does. Our faith makes the impossible possible. So God says, when you start looking at your situation, when you start looking at the promises that he has concerning you through faith, he said, you're going to have a promise-demic. I hope somebody caught that. You're going to have a promise-demic. And if you understand what I'm saying, just type it over in the chat section, a promise-demic. And we know what a pandemic is. And a promise demic is just like it. We had COVID breaking out everywhere. But God said, when you start looking at what I promised you through faith, and you start responding accordingly, he said you're gonna experience a promise demic. Every time you turn around, it's gonna be an outbreak. Come on here. This one called it, that one called it, he called it, she called it, they called it, we all called it. I ain't masking up for this one, baby. I want to be contagious on this one. Contact. You got it now. And God said, when you start to operate in faith, that's what's going to happen. And they tell you they told us, and they're constantly telling us during the pandemic, that they said, watch this. The first thing that they told us to cover up, come on here, was your mouth. Woo, did you catch that? That was the first thing that they told you to cover up, was your mouth. But in this promise demic, that's the first thing that you're going to learn to open up and decree is your mouth. Whew. I ain't covering this one up. I'm going to let it all out. If I got to say it every day, I got to let it out. I ain't covering this up. And most of us can understand and relate to why they told us to cover up our mouth. And have you ever tried to listen to somebody who has a mask over their mouth? You can't even really understand what they're saying. And you're constantly just like, huh? Huh? What you say? What you said? I couldn't understand you. I couldn't understand you. And God said, when we start to look at it through the make the impossible possible faith, we gonna have a promise demic. She gonna have an outbreak. He gonna have an outbreak. I'm gonna have an outbreak. They gonna have an outbreak. All of life meets the word is going to have an outbreak because we in a promise demic. Every time you turn around, when we walk in faith, every time you turn around, it's going to be a promise being made manifest. Is anybody ready for that? I'm ready to see my promises made manifest. I'm ready to have an outbreak. I'm just not ready to have an outbreak. I'm ready to be contagious. Come on here. Is anybody ready to be contagious? When you get in contact with somebody, when somebody leaves your presence, when somebody is in your presence, when they leave your presence, they said, oh my God, you know how it was during the pandemic. You got around somebody and God forbid if they cough, you was looking like, what? I hope I don't catch that. But when you become contagious in a promise demic, that's the thing they want to catch. Breathe on me. Say something. Because you want them to have the symptoms that you got. Because you want them to experience, come on here, the promises of God. You want them to experience everything that God is doing in your life. You want it to be a part of their life too. Because it's called a promise demic. Now, when people ask you what you think about the pandemic, I don't know because I ain't living in that no more. In the spirit, I know naturally it's still happening. That doesn't mean for me to get out here and be foolish now. But in the spirit, I'm in a promise demic. I'm living in a promise demic. That's your new response to I'm living in a promise demic now. And what you're signifying, what you're telling them is that I'm walking by faith. Because as I walk by faith, everything that God has promised to me, it's going to break out. Come on, it's going to break out. I'm living in a promise demic. If that's you, just type it over in the chat section. I'm living in a promise demic. Because I'm walking by faith. I'm living in a promise demic. And they assess it. They assess the environment that they're in, and they find all of these things. And Jesus, he responds to them. They tell Jesus what they see. They told Jesus that it was dry. They told Jesus that it was too late. They told Jesus that it was too many people. But I need for you to look at what Jesus' response to them was. Jesus responds to all of their opposing variables in two parts. The first thing that Jesus says in verse 16, but Jesus said unto them, Jesus said, they need not depart. Oh my God. I'm telling Jesus everything that is wrong. I'm telling Jesus everything, every reason that I could possibly use to keep me from walking in faith. And Jesus' response was, don't go nowhere. Come on. Oh God, did somebody catch that? I just need for you to look at your situation and look at everything that has been going wrong, everything that you've been dealing with, everything that's been frustrating you. And I need for you to apply what Jesus said to the disciples to your situation, because Jesus told the disciples, he said, they don't need to go nowhere. You ever got frustrated on a job? I need to find me a new job. You got frustrated in your relationship. I need to find me a new man. I need to find me a new woman. I need to find something new. I'm frustrated with living here where I'm living at. If I could just go and move to another place, I need to move. I need to move. I need to move. I need to move. But look at what Jesus told them. Jesus said, they need not depart. He said, you don't have to go anywhere else. He said, because everything, what Jesus was telling them in that statement was, he said, I know the conditions that you are facing. He said, I know what you're dealing with. He said, but you ain't got to move on this one. You ain't got to move on this one. He said, because everything you need, he said, I got it. He said, I got it because I am enough. I got it. If you believe that, just type it over in the chat section. He got it. You know what you've been dealing with. You know what you've been praying for. You know what you've been believing God for. But do you believe him enough to decree and declare he got it? I ain't got to move. I ain't got to relocate. I ain't got to change jobs. I ain't got to get no new boo. I ain't got to get none of that because he got it. He got it. He got it. That's the first thing that Jesus tells them. He said, they ain't got to go nowhere. I got it. When they make me mad, I ain't got to go nowhere. He got it. But look at the second part. He then tells the disciples, he said, give them something to eat. The disciples have already told Jesus the conditions. They said, Jesus, this environment is not even conducive to producing life necessities. And you gonna respond and tell us to give them something to eat? We just told you we ain't. Where we gonna get it from? Where we gonna get it from? But Jesus is strategic in what he is saying to the disciples. He did not, watch this. Jesus said, give them something to eat. Jesus never told the disciples to provide it for them. Oh, did y'all catch that? So if Jesus is giving me a command, that means he is already made provision. And sometimes we get stressed out because God is telling us to give something because we interpret that as if God is meaning to provide it. He never told them to provide it. He said, give it. Woo. So if he is giving them the command to give it, that means that he has already made the way for it to be provided. If y'all just understood that, give me a virtual hand wave if you understood that. Thank you. Because sometimes we get messed up because of what God is telling us to give. But if he's telling us to give it, that means that he has already provided a way for it to be given. Jesus said, you ain't got to go hunt for it. He said, you ain't got to cook it. He said, but just use what I give you as I have instructed you to. And when God gives instructions like that, watch this, he's not after your substance. Whew, did somebody just catch that? Because he was telling them, he said, give it. They had already assessed the situation and told him what was not there. But he still told them to give out of what they said was not there. Oh my God. Have you ever been messed up because you felt like God was asking you for something that you felt like wasn't there? Oh, you trying to preach it for me. I see you. But when God gives you instructions like that, he's not after your substance. He's not after your money. God is after something that's more valuable than your substance. He's after something that's more valuable than your money. God is after your faith. Woo, come on here. And sometimes so many of us have got lost because of one word, give. We thought God and we thought the church was after our money, but with all actuality, God was after your faith. Come on here. Because they thought the vitality of their conditions excused them from obeying God. It was never about the money. It was never about the fish. It was never about the bread. It was always about their faith. It's never about the job more so than it is your faith. It's not about your sickness or your disability more so than it is your faith. It's not about your children. It's not about your marriage. It's not about the house. It's not about the car. It's about your faith. Can somebody just type that over in the chat section for me? It's not about what I thought it was about. I thought it was about everything else other than my faith. Woo. It's about my faith. And when you are purposed to be whole, every area of your life will be challenged. Come on here. When you are purposed to be whole in every area of your life, you are going to be challenged in every area of your life because God will never leave a weak area weak. Whew. It's not about the relationship. It was about your faith. It wasn't about the disagreement with your children. It's about your faith. It's not about your finances. It's about your faith. It's not about the job. It's about your faith. To behold, those areas will be challenged. And Jesus tells him, he said, give them something to eat. Come on. Is there anybody else other than me that's gotten it wrong sometimes? Because I've been thinking that it was about one thing when in all actuality, it's been about something totally different. It's been about something totally different. And the disciples, they tell Jesus in verse 17, they said, all we have is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, and we got them from this little boy over here. That's all we got. We got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and we got them from this little boy. All these grown-ups in this room, and ain't nobody got no food but this little boy. And the little boy is mentioned because I believe that the little boy is demonstrating the kind of faith that God intends for us as believers to have. The Bible does not mention it, but I think most kids And most of y'all saw King Hill in when we was doing worship. He had his mama's phone, and we saw King Hill. And most people know that when you're dealing with children, Lawana can tell you that, because she keeps kids, and she's been in the child care business for quite some time, and she can tell you most kids do not like to share. Come on. Most kids do not like to share. I got a little niece, and she loves gummy bears. And Aunt Pepper dare not ask her for her gummy bears. But watch this. There are sometimes that Aunt Pepper will, that's what she calls me. She calls me Aunt Pepper. Sometimes Aunt Pepper will ask her for her gummy bears. Watch this. Not because I need her gummy bears. Did y'all catch that? But sometimes I'm asking her for her gummy bears because I want to see if she trusts Aunt Pepper enough, the one that sometimes provides her the gummy bears, to give them back to me, because what she does not know is that I got a whole bag upstairs waiting to send to her. Come on here. And most children do not want to share. But this child had to have something inside of his mind or something in his spirit that says, I don't know, when he left home, if he saw some more fish and bread and he knew as long as he could make it back home, he was going to get some more. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, this child gave. Come on. This child gave all that he had to feed all that was there. He may not have necessarily known how it was going to get to him, but there was something in him that says there's either some more or there's something better. Come on here. When God is asking you for something, you got to have, it will be beneficial. You don't have to. It would be beneficial for you to have the mindset, I got to obey God because there's either something more or there's something better. There's some more or there's something better. There's either more or there's something better. I don't know if he caught faith as he was in the healing service, that he said to himself, if this man can heal these people. I don't know if he saw people with one leg, one eye, one arm. I don't know everything that this child might have saw, but this child experienced something to where he said, watch this, I'm going to give what I got because I believe that he is enough. I'm going to give it. And Jesus tells the disciples, after they tell Jesus what they have, they said, we got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Watch Jesus' response. Jesus could have easily told the disciples, give it to the people. Come on. Give it to the bill collector. Give it to this one. Give it to that one. But notice what Jesus said in verse 18. And he said, bring them hither to me. Jesus' response to the disciples was, he said, bring it to me. Come on here. He said, bring it to me. Your loneliness, bring it to me. Your heartache, bring it to me. Your disappointments, bring it to me. It would be easy to think that Jesus was talking, he was just talking about the bread and the fish. But when Jesus said, bring it to me, he was not only talking about the bread and the fish. When you bring something in this context, it means to relinquish. What Jesus was saying was, he said, relinquish your controlling power to my creative power. Uh. So when God is telling us to do something, when God is trying to get us to move into faith on something, oftentimes what God is saying is, he said, give up your controlling power to my creative power. So now I'm faced with a choice. Do I want God's, watch this, creative power, or do I want my controlling power? Let me weigh these out. Think about that for a minute. Do I want to be in control and still be limited and restricted? Or do I want God's creative power? And the word creative by itself says everything. Come on here. Because if he has controlling, if he has if he has creative power, then guess what he can do for the thing that I gave up control over? Did somebody just catch that? If you did, just give me a virtual hand wave. When I'm willing to give up my controlling power to his creative power, guess what can happen to the thing that I gave up control over? He can create it with his power. Woo! And sometimes I'm reluctant to give up my control and make it subject to his creative power. So then I still go in lack because I would not let the creative power have full effect in my life because I needed to have control. Mm, I think somebody caught that. And in this, the bread and the fish represents, watch this, their inability. So in all actuality, God was saying, bring me what you cannot do. Huh? He said, bring me what you cannot do. And their bringing it represents or it mirrors their faith. It mirrors their faith. And faith is our trust and our confidence in God demonstrated by our obedience to his word. I'm going to say that for us again. Faith is our trust and confidence in God demonstrated by our obedience to his word. But how many of us know faith is oftentimes coded? And we know that a coating is a layer or layers of protection to keep the valuable part intact from substantial damage. Our faith is oftentimes coated. It is covered by something to keep the most valuable part from being damaged. And the best example that God gave me was, and we're almost about to close, but was our cell phones. How many of us have a cell phone case on our phone? We have a case on our cell phone. And most of us can agree that the reason that we have a case on our cell phone is because we done paid too much for these daggone phones to be dropping them and the screen breaking, the screen cracking. Am I right about it? And I refuse to give them $250. I don't know how much it is now. I refuse to give them $250 for a new screen or a new phone. And most of us can agree that we have a case on our phone for the protection. And I might have missed it, but if you have a case on your phone, just give me a virtual hand wave so you know what I'm talking about. And you have your phone protected so you can protect your phone because you don't want any damage to happen to your phone. The case protects our phone from drops, spills, and other damages. And we value, watch this, we value our phones so much that we don't even care what happens to the case. Come on here, as long as the phone don't get broken or damaged. I don't care what the case look like. Come on. But when I take this case off, I need the screen. Listen, y'all know what I'm talking about. We didn't have screen protectors that was so damaged that if we slid our finger across them, we was getting cut. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Where you done got cut or it's done put a little mark on your finger because the screen was all cracked up and you had to be real ginger at how you slid your finger across the screen, because if you slid it across too fast or in a certain manner or in a certain direction, you was gonna have a little bleed. You didn't even care about that, did you? As long as the real screen wasn't cracked. I need for Life Meets the Word to follow me on this, because God said some of the things that I've asked you for, I've only done it to protect your faith. Come on here. And he said you didn't care. He said I need for you to have the same mentality about your faith as you do, watch this, your cell phone. You will protect your cell phone at all costs. Whether I have or whether I don't have, did I protect my faith? Woo. And it's funny sometimes that we spend more time protecting our cell phones more so than we do our faith. Because we deem our cell phones to be valuable. But God said your faith is just as valuable, because your faith can make the impossible possible. And I know when we're picking out cell phone cases, there's been times that my husband has tried to get a cell phone case, a knockoff. Okay? Let's just be truthful. Some of them work, some of them don't. And I remember asking him one time, I said, babe, why would you get a $20 case to protect a $1,400 phone? And we're going to go over a little bit today. And my husband thought about it for me. He said, babe, you're right. And I don't get paid by them, so this is not a paid advertisement. But I love Otterbox. You can drop it. Come on. You can throw it. You can flip it, twist it, and bop it. It ain't gonna break. My husband drives 18-wheelers. He had an Otterbox case on his phone. Ran it over by accident with the 18-wheeler. Took the phone out of the case. Y'all don't hear me. In perfect condition. Watch this. And because the phone was in perfect condition, now the case took some damage. Okay? It took the brunt of the damage. But watch this. When the time came for him to upgrade, he did not have to worry about the damage that was done to his phone. And sometimes if we're not careful, watch this. This is what's getting us sometimes, because sometimes we care more about the case than we do the phone. And when it's time for upgrading season, we can't even do the proper upgrades. Did somebody catch that? Because when we care more about our money than we do our faith, we can't even make the upgrade to the next level. We ain't moving up nowhere. You ain't getting a deluxe apartment in the skies. Come on, Wheezy. Because your faith has been damaged. Your faith has took on some things, or matter of fact, your faith has not developed for you to take on the upgrades. Come on. Because sometimes we're wanting the upgrades, but watch this, our faith is not able to handle the upgrades. And we thinking that God ain't doing it, but God says, I'm enough. I'm not asking you for anything that I have not made provision for you to give me back. And I go back to verse 16, where we took our text from, where God is saying, I'm enough. And I just pray that somebody's faith is ignited on today, that they said, I don't know what God might ask me to do. And, you know, if I really think about it, I get nervous sometimes. But when I really look at the fact of what he said in verse 16, after, and notice what he did. The disciples told him all of the conditions. The disciples told him all of the variables that was against them and the people. But God still said, there no need to depart. God says, you ain't got to go nowhere. I know that there has been some challenges facing you, the economy, the finances, inflation, shrinkflation, deflation, frustration. He said, but you ain't got to go nowhere. He said, if you stay right here in my word and you do what I tell you to do, he said, I am enough to bring to pass anything that I've ever promised you. He said, I'm enough to do it. I'm enough to do it. I am enough. I've challenged you in those areas. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't trying to protect your marriage. I wasn't trying to protect your finances. I was trying to protect your faith, because if I can protect your faith, I can preserve your marriage. If I can protect your faith, I can increase your finances. I can create something to make that happen. Because through faith, I can make the impossible possible. I am enough. I'm enough. I'm enough. God said, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to get you another church. You don't have to get you another religion. He said, all you got to do is walk in faith according to what I have told you to do. And he said, I am enough to bring it to pass. If you receive that, just type it over in the chat section. He's enough. I believe that he is enough. I believe that he is enough. I might have dropped the ball in this area, but I believe on today, according to this message, I believe that he is enough. I done told God about my situation. I done told God about my circumstances. I done told God about the vitality of this environment that I am in, but I believe that he is enough. I believe that he is enough.